am thrilled to pieces. My heavens, what a wonderful, wonderful gathering this evening. Just a slight little bit of background. It was 25 years ago when I was first coming out to Gotha. I am a Seminole County resident, interloper here in western Orange County. But I have been told for years that if I was doing German here locally, I had to go out to Gotha because that's where the German community in the Orlando area was, right? And 25 years ago I came out, and at that time Yellow Dog Eats wasn't Yellow Dog Eats. It was a sort of convenience store with Red Hots and beef jerky. And I asked where the Nehrling house was, and the poor little 16-year-old there had no idea what I was talking about. And then I said, well, do you know where Barbara Bosciardi is? And he also didn't have the faintest idea, the lovely widow who was living in Henry Nehrling's house. And then I said, well, do you know where the old German graveyard is? Well, you knew where that was, because I understand there had been a whole lot of beer parties there in the old graveyard, right? So it's been 25 years of wonderful discoveries for me, and 25 years of interacting with fabulous people, because as you can tell, the story of Henry Nehrling is so multifaceted that it draws all sorts of people in. So if you're expecting a heck of a lot of information about plants, I'm the wrong presenter. Yeah, I didn't know what a caladium was from a hole in the ground when we started. I've learned a lot. I know a little bit about birds, but not very much. What I'm particularly interested in is this cultural diversity, this German colony, as it was being called, this period in time where a community was established of German speakers here in Orange County. And I'm particularly interested in the background of this native-born gentleman, Henry Nehrling, and the journey that he takes through life that brings him to Gotha and where his life comes to an end, right? So I'm going to give, as you can, I hope, see, 5 different little parts, and I'm going to try to keep it. You have to watch professors, they get a little long-winded, so the people in the back hold up 5 fingers, right? You're going to, okay? Tell me, cut it, Nancy Decker, this is enough, right? 5 different parts, just a little bit about his early years in Wisconsin and Chicago. A bit about his time as a teacher in Texas and Missouri. Another bit about his work as a city official in Milwaukee between 1890 and 1902. His time in Gotha, but also I'm wanting to talk about, okay, what legacy is there, and what are some of the historical things that are connected to Nehrling that we really, beyond just the interest in the gardens itself, that we ought to be exploring because they resonate with us today still. So let's look at part 1, okay? Here is, if you can see Lake Michigan, here is the birthplace of Henry Nehrling. The place is called Hermann, clearly a German settlement, near Sheboygan, also near Howard's Grove, if you want to go into Google Maps and find out where that is, right? This was a place that his family had moved to from Germany. This was a German-speaking settlement. This is the place where Henry Nehrling learned to love birds. This was a very rural area at that point. This is where his early schooling took place. This was where many of his family members continued to live. This Addison, Illinois, is the place where he went to college. The Lutheran Church in the Midwest was finding that it was particularly important to have teacher colleges established because they knew that their communities would need German-speaking teachers. Germans had come by the thousands, by a couple million. In the 1860s, 1870s, there had been a wave also in the 1840s coming over to the United States. And the Lutheran Church was wanting to create the infrastructure to allow the German-speaking communities to be able to continue using the German language in their homes and seeing to it that their children were educated in German, right? So Nehrling went to this seminary, as it was called, because they offered seminars. So it's not seminary in the sense of a theological education. Nehrling was educated as a teacher at this school in Addison, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. And he marries Sophie Julie Nehrling, Sophie Julie Schaff Nehrling, and she is the, I wish I had even more information about her. She has to have been one of the reasons why he was able to carry on as he did. She was the mother of 9 children, and as you just saw, we're not talking about 9 children all born in the same place, right? She was mother of 9 children while he's out in the swamps looking for trees, while he's out looking at birds, while he's out taking care of a museum, right? I think she's an absolutely fascinating figure, and if you want to take a pilgrimage out to the old Zion Lutheran Church graveyard, you will find her gravestone there, and I'll show that to you in just a second with a little bit more information. Here is a picture of the 9 children, and Henry and Sophie, and you can see these are children born between 1876 and 1896. We've got 20 years of childbearing. Makes me tired just thinking about it. Yeah. But a magnificent picture then of the Nehrling family just before they came to live in Gotha. This was done at a photographer's studio in Milwaukee. We'll move on to phase 2. So early life, we've got him educated, we've got him married, and he then, Henry takes off as a teacher. I'm becoming more clearly aware that the Missouri Synod, and evidently not just the Missouri Synod, will send out calls. So just as there is a call for a pastor, there is a call for a teacher for these very small, some of the small German settlements, German-speaking settlements at this time in the 1870s. So the first place that Nehrling goes to, and you're saying, wait a minute, this is not a place, Nancy Douglas. You're showing us a bird. This was actually a very recent article in the New York Times talking about auks. Anybody know auks? Yeah? We have ornithologists in the group, yeah? And what's to know about auks?
They were easy to hunt down and kill, and so the people on ships found them as a easy prey, and they harvested all of them to feed the sailors and drove them to extinction.
Exactly. Evidently in the 16th century, some of the explorers were just amazed at the number of auks. And indeed, they're gone, okay? So the New York Times is talking about the extinction of auks, clearly because there's such a concern about the reduction in bird populations these days, right? But you're saying, okay, now what does this have to do with Henry Nehrling? Well, the American Ornithological, at that time I think it was called Ornithologists Union, they published a journal called The Auk, clearly because of the concerns about extinction of birds, right? And in that, the very first years of publication, there was already reference to the work that Henry Nehrling was doing. They're making reference here to the fact that he lives in Pierce City, Missouri. This was actually Freistadt. They weren't going to refer, I guess, to the German-speaking settlement. And they're referring to the information that he had gathered while he had been in Texas. So what Nehrling is doing is he is using teaching positions that the Lutheran Church is organizing. And while he is in these rural areas, he is gathering information about local birds. This is, of course, a part of the world that Audubon didn't go to, right? Audubon was in the eastern part, and there was a clear need for ornithologists to be gathering information about parts of the United States that had not been frequented by Audubon. One very interesting place is in Fedar, Texas. This is outside of Austin, Texas, right out in the hill country, a little northeast of Austin. And you can see in the background the church, the Trinity Lutheran Church. There are so many Lutheran churches named Trinity. I'm not kidding. This makes historians crazy, right? But this is an older church in the countryside of Texas. This had been a German-speaking congregation, and Nehrling was brought out in order to teach local children, give them instruction in German. And if you look very closely, if you look very closely, I'm testing your eyes too, right? Over on the right-hand side, it says teachers. And at the very top is H. Nehrling, right? The very first teacher here in Fedar, Texas. He had actually spent some time in Houston. We have had communication through the Henry Nehrling Society with individuals at a Lutheran church there who have information about Nehrling when he was in the big city. But here is then a place where Nehrling had been and had been doing a lot of wandering, looking at birds. And you'll see in the middle, it says, Gottes Wort und Luthers Lehre. vergeht nun und nimmermehr. That the Word of God and Luther's teaching may pass away now, but will no more. The indications being that out here, even in the wilds of Texas, that the Lutheran Church was going to have an influence. Down below you see where Fetter is, San Antonio, Houston, down there along the edge. And so Fetter is number one. Number two is Freistadt, which is in the southwest corner of Missouri, Ozarks area, right? And the church where Nehrling was called to teach exists, but not in the form that it existed then. It is now a stone building. But interestingly enough, of course, what are they going to have? They're going to have a fall festival. This is the harvest festival, the Erntefest. So there is still a very strong German connection in the small town of Fedor. 1883. Some of you may travel along Hempel Avenue, right? Here is the indication of the purchase by Hempel of property in Central Florida, signed by, who do you think it's signed by? Okay.
Henry Hempel.
Pardon me?
Henry Hempel?
Oh, well, Henry Hempel, yes. But also by Chester A. Arthur.
Oh.
Right? The president of the United States, right, is signing this, right? This was, and I have to do some background checking on this. The property was owned by the United States, and Hempel purchased the property with the intention of being able to sell it to free-thinking German settlers, right? So we're looking at 1883. We have to remember the Civil War is not yet 20 years over. Reconstruction has ended, but only by a short period of time. And here's Henry Hempel wanting to come down from Buffalo, New York, and do what some rather affluent people had been able to do, wanted to be able to spend winters away from. If you've ever been in Buffalo, you know exactly what winters are like in Buffalo. You can believe why he would want to spend the winters here in Florida, right? But in order to do that, he wanted this community to be not from the most affluent people. He wanted more middle-class people to be able to enjoy that privilege by planting orange groves. And of course, I ask my students, when do oranges get ripe? They have no clue. Right? None of them are out there picking the oranges, right? Yeah. So when I tell them, well, these settlers are coming back to their orange groves at the time when the oranges are ripe, right? And so they're there for the ripened oranges and for the picking of their oranges and for once the railroad comes through, then sending those oranges back to places that don't otherwise get access to oranges. But he's wanting to cash in on the opportunity for people to escape horrible winters. And this is one of the things then, yeah, there's Chester A. Arthur, yeah. This is one of the things then that attracts Henry Nehrling. Of course you can't read this 1885 census in Gotha, it's much too small, but trust me, each one of the little red lines indicates that someone there is from a German-speaking area, either from Germany. One indication is from Switzerland. So we have, and that's a person. That person may be, of course, leading an entire household, so that this portion of the census in 1885 is indicating what a large number of German speakers there are. But just 2 years later, in Gotha. This is the 1885 Florida census. So Nehrling purchases property in Gotha. Now, he may indeed have been in Florida before, but he has not laid eyes on the property in 1880, what do we discern? Yeah, 1883. Franz Siller, a friend from Milwaukee, encourages him to buy property. So Siller is working together with Hempel in order to sell property to German speakers, right? Because the idea is that this becomes a winter paradise, and you will have your German newspaper sent down. Nehrling actually had Pabst Blue Ribbon beer sent down. Yeah, those were essentials. Come on, right? Yeah. So he is interested in also having this opportunity to spend the winter time in Florida. We know that his health had, for quite some time, been rather tricky, right? Apparently the move to Texas originally had been in part because he wanted to be in warmer climate. The move to Missouri as well, okay, maybe things will get better. But the word was out there that winters in Florida, that was going to keep you from those respiratory infections that were killing people left and right, right? So he buys property from Silla, through Silla, and doesn't actually come down to Gotha to look at the property until 1886. Nonetheless, in the volume on early settlers in Orange County, here's, yeah, of course, not the picture of what Nehrling would have looked like in 1884, 1886. But he is registered as one of the significant early settlers of Orange County. So now, let's talk a little bit about Milwaukee. This is remember, he's from Wisconsin. He is actually closer to Sheboygan, but the big city was Milwaukee. And Milwaukee at the time was trying to rival Chicago, right? Milwaukee feeds and supplies the world. It was a major grain shipping center. We know not all of the grain was being sent out simply as flour. We know that Milwaukee was the beer capital of the United States, right? So here was Milwaukee getting its PR people out there to try to rival Chicago, and that was going to be hard. That was going to be hard. Chicago, of course, was the endpoint for particularly the beef industry, right? So all of those cattle that were being brought to the slaughterhouses in Chicago, that was not the area of enterprise in Milwaukee, but nonetheless you had a huge amount of entrepreneurial work that was being done in these German-speaking communities in Milwaukee. Here is a delivery of Pabst beer in Milwaukee, 1900. Yeah. Those of you, if you were in my German class, you would know this for sure. You know that according to the purity laws for Germany, there can be only 4 ingredients in beer. What are they?
Hops, barley, wheat, water,
and only
malt.
Well, the malt is coming from the barley.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. Yeast, right. Yeast was not on the original list. Very good class. Very good. Yay. Okay. And you know that indeed beer was being transported in barrels in horse-drawn wagons, right? Which of course means that you cannot transport the beer very far. As a matter of fact, if that horse has got to go too far, it's going to jostle that beer so much that it's probably going to, it's not good, right? And that's why, guess who used to work for Anheuser-Busch, yeah? That's why, of course, traditionally, particularly canned beer has got all sorts of other stuff in it. My German-born husband said, Pipi Wasser. He thought American beer was absolutely awful, yeah, but part of it had to come, of course, because it was so difficult to be able to transport that beer, right? So here you had the company preparing to transport its product by horse-drawn wagon. And here is the Milwaukee riverfront. When Nehrling leaves Missouri, actually in 1887, he finds employment at the Port of Milwaukee. He is in charge of customs. Of course, the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Lake Michigan that would require a customs agent. But probably the person who is of greater interest to our story is a fellow by the name of Adolf Meinecke. Meinecke had already had a connection to Florida. I understand that he had been doing digs in shell mounds on Lake Butler. Had come down in the wintertime, and he was another figure who played a major role in the life of Henry Nehrling. He was a trustee at the Milwaukee Public Museum, and it's at the Public Museum where Henry Nehrling ultimately gets a position in 1890, a position that really puts him at the forefront of cultural society in Milwaukee. So he is, here's a dashing figure. Look at him. Whoa. He's in the prime of life. He's in the prime of life as the custodian, the curator of the Milwaukee Public Museum at a time when a brand new building was being built. a building that combined the public library and the public museum. Again, with this rivalry with Chicago, Milwaukee was hoping to be able to compete with Chicago in these new public institutions. As part of that, in 1893, he is sent off to visit the Chicago Columbian Exposition, right? This is the World's Fair of 1893. This is, okay, it's 1893, it's not 1892, but it is to mark the 400th anniversary of Columbus landing in the New World, right? And he is absolutely taken. He has already made a name for himself with the German volume, the first edition of his bird book in 1891, Die Nordamerikanische Vogelwelt. And it's interesting that he dedicates, in this German volume, he dedicates the volume to children in the hope that they gain an appreciation of nature. Möge dieses Werk dazu beitragen, unserer herrlichen Vogelwelt im Besonderen und der schönen Natur im Allgemeinen viele Freunde zu gewinnen. He's concerned that the increasing industrialization was leading to a situation where kids didn't know how to go out into nature. They didn't know birds, they didn't know plants, they didn't know what to do. Yeah, God knows what he would be saying, of course, with
Right now.
Okay. Mother too, I know what you're talking about. Grandmother, oh my God. But I want to point out, right, the publisher in Milwaukee went to extraordinary lengths for this book. There are 36 color plates of birds, both in the English edition, in the German edition, and in the English edition. The German edition goes back to a tradition in German publishing, in the German book press. If you take a look, there's an I, a capital I. Those signature beginning letters in text that's so much a part of, well, usually of biblical printing, right? But this was part of the care and expense that was being taken in the publication of the German version. And here is the title page of the English edition that came out 2 years later, Our Native Birds of Song and Beauty. And there was, okay, you could be a little critical, I suppose. Is a parakeet a bird of song? Well, let's not get down to the weeds there, right? Yeah. And here, then, is the horticultural building in 1893. So that by this time, Nehrling has made a huge splash among ornithologists. The Auk, the publication of the Ornithologist Union, is gushing about him. One of the illustrators is a member of the board of the Auk. He is at a zenith of his influence in Milwaukee. And this World's Fair, I mean, this was big time stuff, right? This was the World's Fair where electricity was being shown off, right? Westinghouse and Siemens were there showing electric lights. Oh, this is the World's Fair actually that most people, when they talk about the history of World's Fairs, at least in the U.S., are referring to. Nehrling was over the moon. And while he's there, I'm showing you a page from horticulture, viticulture, permaculture, yeah. Down at the bottom in group 22, floriculture is an entry by Adolfo Lietze, indicating that from Brazil, Mr. Lietze has brought Caladium. And it's here in the 1893 World's Fair that Henry Nehrling is seeing Caladia for the first time. Now again, I asked my students, what's a caladium? Yeah, and I go, elephant ears, veins of color, yeah, but you can imagine what the reaction must have been. Not flowers, colorful leaves, right? For someone who was as interested in ornamental birds and ornamental plants, this was like hitting the mother lode, right? He then oversaw the inauguration of this new building housing the public library and the public museum. I went to Milwaukee about 4 years ago, specifically in order to be able to find out more information about this and about Nehrling's time. This is the entryway, okay? They spared no expense at the time, right? Now, I will tell you, this is no longer the public museum. The public library has taken over the entire building, except that there's a part of the building that used to be the public museum that most people don't get to go in to see. I'm going to let you see some details. This was the meeting room, okay? And you can tell this is late 19th century stuff, right? High-backed leather chairs, wood paneling, my favorite part. The executive loo, yeah. In marble, yeah. Fabulous. At that time, right? 1893, and you had this kind of opportunity in the public museum, yeah. Taxidermy, because of course Henry Nehrling in the Public Museum of Natural History wanted to have the opportunity to be able to mount birds and animals to be able to show to people, right? So there had to be an office of taxidermy. Are we pulling up 5 minutes in the back of it that we were doing okay?
Keep going.
Right, okay, we'll go on, he says. So we're getting here to Gotha, okay? And I put up some red letter dates for the time period that Henry Nehrling is in Gotha, because, frankly, I tried to get the people in Milwaukee to explain to me exactly what happened. Yeah? Henry Nehrling is a persona non grata if you go to talk to the people in the public museum. And I still don't understand why, right? Maybe those folks who depend more on public appreciation in order to maintain their offices here in Winter Garden can feel it better. Something happened. I think they felt that he didn't shepherd funds, maybe spent too much on birds. I don't know. This is an area that we need to understand, right? He comes, he walks away from controversy. They haven't fired him, but he is clearly of a sense that he has been dishonored at that time. Ooh, oh, heavens, right? You don't put his honor into question. And he moves in January to Gotha, comes down. He's already been here 4 months at a time, right? But only for short periods, and brings his family down 6 months later, right? So now, not all of his children, but many of his children and Sophie are down here after the house that we know and love has been moved by ox cart from Lake Olivia over to be on the site that we know, right? And it's here that he begins to intensively cultivate the caladium. He continues to cultivate and hybridize the amaryllis. The amaryllis would probably not be what it is today if it hadn't been for the work that Henry Nehrling was doing. Palms and bamboo. Well, bamboo we see, right? We can continue to see that at Nehrling Gardens. If you haven't seen this yet, whoa, go see the bamboo too, right? Red letter dates. 3 family members, females, die in Gotha. His 2 youngest daughters die in 1904 and 1906, and Sophie dies. His wife dies in 1911. So you're asking yourself, are you trying to say that life in Gotha had something to do with their deaths? I don't know. It can't have been easy for women in long, heavy skirts and dresses. Can't have been easy for them in the heat 12 months out of the year here, right? 1917, the freeze. That ultimately convinces Nehrling that he cannot continue his cultivation of the caladium and of other ornamental plants here, that the freezes are moving too far south, and he packs up his stuff into his automobile and moves them down to the gardens that he establishes in Naples. And in 1928, because Thomas Edison has his own winter home in Florida, Nehrling is invited to Edison's 80th birthday party, at which point Edison encourages Nehrling to be engaged in the search for sources of latex. Not just rubber tree plants, right? They have learned through the First World War that there's going to be a need for rubber, and that we can't depend upon rubber sources outside of the United States in the time of war. Right? Here is Sophie Nehrling's headstone. She's in a far back corner of the old German graveyard. And I will tell you that I've been out there. Anybody tromped out? Yeah. I see all the Nehrling board members raising their hands. Whoa. If you haven't been out there, bring your mosquito repellent and go out. Yeah. And we really, we should work indeed with the Zion Lutheran Church to clear up. I think there are actually some Scout
There's an
projects.
Eagle Scout project coming up. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, the Eagle Scout project. But this is a fascinating place to take a look at. And in the back corner is Sophie Nehrling's headstone. And on the front of the headstone, in German, it says, "Es ist bestimmt in Gottes Rat, dass man vom Liebsten, was man hat, muss scheiden, ja scheiden." It is surely among God's advice that one has to be separated from the dearest thing one has. And on the back, there is a scripture about, also in German, auferstanden, auferstanden, so talking about the resurrection. And I didn't see the inscription on the back until an East German camera team came looking for stories about places that had the names of East German cities. Gotha was named for Gotha, which is a very well-known German city in the eastern part of Germany and the birthplace of Henry Hempel. Here, interesting. 1911, the record of registration of automobiles, okay? And number, I'm looking for there, where did you go?
Fourth one
The
down.
last one, yes indeed. He is listed among the people in 1911 who had an automobile here in Florida, right? Yeah. And the make of the automobile is an EMF. I thought he would have had a Ford. Evidently, the Ford production, as we know it, wasn't even taking place yet in 1911, right? This is an automobile line that was being produced for approximately 3 years, from 1910 to 1912. Good grief. How did Nehrling get this? I don't know. But he had an automobile at his disposal. We know from the archives at Rollins that among the things that he indicates in his account books is the amount of gasoline that he's having to buy in order to run this automobile. And it is in the automobile that he's able to carry these ornamental plants down to Naples. There it is. Whoa! You got one of those in your garage? Yeah. Okay, we're coming to an end. My folks in the back holding up 5 fingers, two fingers. I got it. All right. Okay. I want to bring up a couple of things. If you're looking for expert advice on the Caladium, I keep telling you, yeah, you got the wrong lady. But boy, have I got some interesting info. Here is a record of the marriage of Henry Nehrling's firstborn, Lydia. Lydia actually worked with Nehrling in the public museum. She was an assistant in the public museum and continued even after Nehrling was no longer the custodian, right? She continued after 1902 when he came down to Gotha. She asks for a leave in order to come down in 1911 when her mother was dying. And was allowed to come down, evidently continued to receive some sort of compensation even when she was not working. But she did not go back to the museum, as we can see. She got married within a few months after the death of her mother and went with her fiance to Niagara Falls in order to get married. I understand that used to be the place to get married, right? Yeah. The story continues. Her husband, Alfred Waldeck, was of Austrian nationality. right? And you may know that in 1917, it became necessary for those who did not have American citizenship to renounce their citizenship, particularly if they belonged to a nationality against whom the Western Allies were fighting, right? So Austrians and Germans were suspected of plotting against the United States, right? So here is the documentation from Lydia's husband, where he renounces his allegiance to Austria in the hopes of being able to prove his loyalty to the United States. Now you're saying, well, how come he's 33 years old, how come he hasn't taken on American citizenship? And, you know, you get down here, did he have to show American citizenship to get a driver's license? Mm-hmm. Did he have to show American citizenship to be able to rent a house? No. Had he asked for a passport, then okay, yeah, he would have had to have shown American citizenship. But okay, and it's my understanding, and here's the fascinating thing, take a look at the archives here, because there are a number of German families here in Winter Garden for whom the question of citizenship and proving their loyalty to the United States in the course of the First World War became a big issue. Okay? Well, now another thing I need to tell you. When Lydia married her husband, Alfred, by marrying a non-American, she lost her American citizenship.
Mm.
You know, the rights and regulations on women are very different. A woman marries, and what happens? She loses any property that she has. Her rights are going to go to her children. Property rights would go to her children in the case of the death of a husband, right? She's lost her American citizenship. It is 1918. They're trying to see to it that Alfred can prove his loyalty. He signs up for the draft, right? Signs up for the draft. And many, many, many of these German language families were having to prove their loyalty to the United States, right? They were under suspicion, in large part because German-speaking settlements had fought on the side of the Union Army during the Civil War. And there was great concern that these rabble-rousing, free-thinking Germans were going to instill some rather radical ideas about equality among African Americans. 1935, Lydia is requesting to have her U.S. citizenship reinstated. Now, why would she have waited? U.S. was not in the war very long, not to say that there weren't American losses in the First World War, but we got in 1917, it was over in November of 1918, right? This is 1935, what's happened?
The right to vote? Citizens?
Hitler has come to power.
Oh. Mm.
In 1933, And it's pretty clear that you want to put some distance between yourself and him.
Mm.
Okay? And she wants to make sure that she has her U.S. citizenship. And it is, so we are looking at one last case, and I've tried your patience, but I think this is really interesting. There's a letter sent to the Committee on Public Information. This is a kind of forerunner of the FBI, right? And this is 1918. And in this letter, as you can see, seeing your appeal in everybody's magazine and feeling it my duty to do what I can in this matter, I wish to report that I know of a family of German descent, Miss Bowen, living in Gotha, Florida. I was a member of the family of H. Nehrling of Gotha, and while there was mightily stirred by conditions, no one was allowed to express an opinion adverse to German victory or to speak of cruelties practiced by them without his going into a rage. If his paper, printed in German, he took no other, had news of an Allied victory, he refused to read it and threw it on the floor. He refused for a long time to allow his wife to use American flags on her car and would not permit her to do Red Cross work and would not himself contribute. This goes on for 4 pages. Signed by F.H. Hooler. Who the heck is that? Until I took students to take a look at the gravesite of Henry Nehrling. Has anybody been down to
Woodlawn,
yeah,
front gates.
Woodlawn, of course. Yeah. 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 Who's right next to him?
His mother-in-law.
Whose name is Fanny Cooler. Whoa. Huh. So, do I have all the answers about this? Heck no. but we have work to do, people, right? We have work to do. These issues about people speaking other languages and reading foreign language newspapers, are they fully American? Was Nehrling not loyal enough? Is that really true? Or is this a woman, because if you take a look at it, she and he are not too far apart in age at the time. Betty Nehrling is considerably younger than Henry, right? Yeah. Is she just discontented and okay, wants to throw a monkey wrench in the works? I don't know.
So this is his second wife's mother. Okay.
His second wife's mother.
Yes.
I'm most struck by he refused to allow his wife to use flags on her car.
Yeah,
Like in 1935, she had a car.
it looks that way.
Yeah.
Were they a 2-car family? Wow.
That's
I
pretty
don't know. Yeah, I have to go back and look for car registrations, don't I? Yeah. Well, that's the last slide. I have tried your patience, but I want us all to work together, right? The Nehrling project is too fascinating for words, right? It's history, it's ornithology, it's horticulture, it's technology. If we start looking at what the Nallys did after the Nehrlings were gone and they took over the property, that place is fascinating. And I'm hoping that all of you will continue to support the efforts of all of these institutions here tonight. There's so much work yet left to do. Thank you so much.
magazine, which is open. I would love for you guys to see the exhibit, so let's head over.